You might be able to see behind me some lynchets up on the far hill. It depends whether or not I've done the correct settings on this camera. I'm looking for a Dark Age landmark called the Whirling ditch, and Grundy mistranslates it. He says the little ditch, but Whirling is in the rune poem of I can't remember which particular rune it was, but it was talks about the whirling hail. It was about hail whirling in the sky.
Hail byth wheatest corner, whorft hit of heavenes lufta, welcath hit windes shura, wherthath hit to watera seethan.
And uses the word Whirling, and he mistranslates a lot of things. The old charlatan, but he's good to start you off if you're interpreting the landscape. Though you will have to correct him at some point if you're going to do it for any length of time. But I'm not necessarily correcting him in this. I'm correcting his translation. I might not be correcting his translation onto the map. It's all very tentative. It's very hard to place these things. What sends me off in a different direction from him is the word bay, which means by in modern English. This is by edge, and the edge is along here going north. Now, Grundy takes it west along the current boundary, and in many ways he's right, because he's right to think the way he has, because it's a county boundary, and counties have changed in the last 200 years, but not before then. They have changed very little up until then. And so he's taken Occam's razor, that where things are equal, the simplest solution is the correct one. And now I'm getting more complicated, but my reading is more of the charter is more honest. It's more giving the text the respect it deserves, and it says quite clearly by edge, and there are the boundary that he follows doesn't follow an edge anywhere. It's that word by is really important. It's not to or across or it's by along the edge. So anyway, those lynches over there, I think, is the Whirling ditch, the Whirling ditch. But it's quite tentative. I'm not sure. And to get here, I had to go along the edge. I've always admired those lynchets. It's a very pretty part of the English landscape. This is north of Bath in Cold Ashton parish, and it's very striking, this valley, and it is those lynchets catch your eye while driving past, and it's a very dangerous road. I walked 100 yards along it on the verge, and every minute I was expecting it to be mowed down. So this along here is the eastern part of the ridgeway that goes north from Bath. It is not mentioned in the charter. The other side is the western side, because there's this great big coombe running through, separating the hilltop, the ridge. And over there are two, and according to Grundy, 3 different Saxon names for it.
The most interesting of which is the Salt Hairportha, which is our friend the Hairepartha, which means highway or army path, and tends to be roads that are high up. They are through roads. They are the motorway of the ancient world. The word salt is also interesting, because what it suggests, and is in fact true, this ridgeway does join up with the other roads that go to Droitwich, and there further up into Gloucestershire, they're called Salthair Pathers as well, and Saltway and various other names. So this is Droitwich, is where salt is manufactured at scale and then sent south. So what we've got, that's an interesting piece of information, but it's not just that. We also have the another charter that calls it a strat, which means Roman road. So it's a Romanized ridgeway.
Now it says, the charter says, somewhere down, if my reading's correct, the charter says that Enfrithers Wulas are down there, and there's a load of wells, a load of springs down there that feed into the bottom of the Coombe and then go down to join the Lambrook. And they're not in the today. I've scoured the tithe map. Today there's no mention of anything like Enfrith or Eddies or whatever. There's no modernisation of that word. What it is, there is a field called Bridewell, which could be looking back to an old name for one of these springs. Now Grundy, in one of his glossaries, says that Bridewell is a spring related to a bride. Again, he's wrong. It is the Old English word brid, which is a young bird, a bird. It is the spring of the bird, but specifically the spring of the young birds, spring of the chicklings. Very pretty coombe. I'm enjoying walking through it, and the sun's very warm. It's a nice spring day. Just stopped and had a sandwich, sat amongst the primroses, and all's well with the world. I'm trying to interpret these earthworks. I don't see the point of having a lynch just here. It may be something else entirely, but anyway. The hedge back there was interesting. There was several species in it. There's some evidence of laying as well, and there was elder, ash, rose, hawthorn, blackthorn, and hazel. So that's six species, but it's very, very similar to the hedge we saw over the other field. So maybe a local appetite for that sort of arrangement for their hedges. This stream, I don't know whether it's called it this far up, but this is on this joins up with, and seems to be the main line of a river that when it gets to Bath is called the Lambrook, and you may notice a place called Lambridge if you live in Bath, and it's named after the Lambrook. And as I said, over there it's called the Birdwell, the Bridewell today, Burrad Wullas and Burrad Wulla. But lamb, nothing to do with spring lambs. There's no B on the end. So what we have is lamb, which is loam, which is clay soil that's been, certainly from gardeners' perspective, it's really nice soil. You know, it's got plenty of, it's not sandy, it's originally clay, but it's become sort of mixed with other organic matter and become really good soil. So that's probably the answer. It doesn't really, to me, it never makes any sense why you would have, there's many Lambrooks and Lambourns, why you would have it named after the soil around it, but there you go. That seems to be the theory. He might be drying his wings out. He might have just been hatched out of his chrysalis, and they have to dry their wings out to get any good use out of them. It's quite a dangerous time for a butterfly. How beautiful is that? That's the first one I've seen this year. That's one of my favourite nurseries, garden centres. They don't call themselves a garden centre. And rare plants. They used to have some rare edibles like the blue basil and things like that. But you will get some very strange plants there. But they're a little bit bossy. And there I once went in and they said, we're shutting early, we've got the Oxford Botanical Society coming, would you mind, sir, you know, but come along, it's you will find interesting plants. It's a nice location, it's worth, I mean, let's face it, we go to garden centres for a bit of a afternoon out, don't we? So it doesn't count, it is, they've made an effort to lay this hazel, try and make, do you see how they laid the leaders down and then new shoots have come up. But it's obviously not impenetrable because they've had to put wire, so it doesn't count in my book. There you go, it's worth seeing it, you know, people are making an effort. Now you agree with me, don't you, that this is a grand bucolic picture. This is the English countryside at its best. And the point I'll come to this particularly beautiful valley is to point out the English countryside doesn't have to be wood, it doesn't have to be woodland, and definitely doesn't have to be forest. The reason why I'm saying this is countryside that is beautiful and ecological, but is not forest, and the reason why I'm saying that is that they've announced millions of pounds of funding to create a new western forest that includes Gloucestershire, Somerset, parts of Wiltshire, and obviously I'm against it, and these are the, not entirely, there's some things about it. Let's go through the good things. And obviously this is part of the charitable or heritage voluntary sector, trying to affect the environment for ecological reasons. Now what might be good that comes out of this is greater access for you and I to go for walks, to enjoy ourselves, to have picnics, to go watching birds and all the other good things that you can do in the countryside. The second thing is they're going to create a marketplace for farmers to offer services for people. I presume they're going to use some of the funding to do that, which is a good thing. Farmers should be paid to make improvements to the landscape, but not in the way that we do it now, where we give them money to do absolutely nothing. Actually, that's just come to an end, incidentally. You should go over to Harry's farm and watch that episode where he talks about the ending of Boris Johnson's sort of welfare for farmers system. But so those are the good things. The bad things. Let's talk about ecology. This is Oliver Rackham says that woodland is land where trees have, I'm paraphrasing now, where trees have spontaneously arisen. You don't plant a wood. The woodmanship is another thing that let me do injustice and do a quote. If I can find it. Woodmanship is not an early form of forestry, but an independent and parallel technique. That forestry, let's not get hung up on the word forest. Forestry, the technique of forestry and the technique of woodmanship are entirely different. With woodmanship, you manage woods that were already there, that have arisen naturally, and you manage them for human need. So you pick out the trees you want to use for timber to build houses, for example, bridges. You would pick them out and let them grow big. Oak, for example, you would do that with. And then amongst the oak, you would have the underwood, and this underwood you would coppice for firewood, and for the houses you were going to build with the oak timber. In between, you would use the rods from the hazel, and use that to the underwood. So it could be ash, it could be other trees. Use that to make wattle and daub, so that we could have a vernacular, ecological, permaculture way of house building. It doesn't have to look like the 15th century. It could look entirely modern. They're doing, and the rich are doing wonderful things with oak. But we don't need to scar the earth for concrete anymore. We've got woodland that shouldn't just be picturesque, shouldn't be just kept the way they are, kept in aspic for emotional reasons, but they should be used. So this could be, somebody could plan for the future along these lines. So that's entirely different from forestry, which is planting a load of pine trees, waiting 50 years, cutting them down, and then they die, which they a lot of, and I've known this from experience, a lot of English trees, if you cut them down to the ground, they re-sprout. I was doing the permaculture technique of planting nitrogen fixing plants, and I chose the older, um, thinking that I would be keen enough to keep them to hedge height. Now of course they shot off as high as they possibly could, so I decided to get rid of them, and cutting them down to the ground doesn't work. You have to keep cutting them over and over again, and that's what an English wood does, is it regenerates naturally, and then human hands guide them for thousands of years have guided them to make them produce for human beings. But that's they're no longer part of that sort of economy, that sort of self-sufficient economy anymore. So to take an ecological line that we're going to plant trees, and they've said specifically they are going to plant trees, is a sort of what's the right word? You see, my wife made me promise I'll be nicer as I get older. Hasn't been well thought out, because that's not. We don't want artificial, exotic trees in the landscape. We want a sustainable landscape with multiple layers, each providing for human need and for the needs of animals. So I think they got it wrong. I think one area where you might want to plant trees is fruit, but then we're talking about orchards, and then we're also coming on to various paragraphs about agroforestry. There is no agroforestry. Name me one piece of land. Combine as many pieces of agroforestry as you can, acreage, and come up with more than 100 acres of agroforestry in this country. Not people's gardens, not rich people experimenting with permaculture. Actual agroforestry. So that means basically means alley cropping with trees down one side and then corn down the middle, or beetroot or whatever. Food production with trees. And I defy you to find any, certainly no more than 100 acres, and I think how many millions of acres there are in England. So I think that is also ill thought out, to be pushing this idea of agroforestry. Even with things like, I mentioned orchards. People don't fill the alleys between orchard trees with secondary planting. They don't do that. It gets mown to help the apple trees, the main crop, come through. And so it's inauthentic. It is an inauthentic expression of ecology when we can that the human ecology, the social ecology we've had for the last 3,000-4,000 years has been sustainable. Now there is evidence that there has been a drop in because weeds have come up. They've measured the weeds from the pollen over. So worse weeds have appeared since we've had agriculture, which tells us that there's less nutrients in the soil than there was 3,000 years ago. But it has sustained us for 3,000 years. And with our science, we can tell these things, and we should be able to correct it by letting things lie in fallow for longer, that sort of thing. More clover. But anyway, yeah. So that's one of my main reasons why I'm against it. And lastly, we're heading towards two things: cutting benefits for disabled people, and we're likely to be going into a war with Russia in 20 years' time. And we're faffing around giving millions of pounds to vanity projects. You could argue we could do with a few more trees, but what I would argue is that we expand those authentic ancient woods that we have, and how you do that is just letting the fields next to them just put a fence around them and don't mow it and don't let animals in there. And that will become an extension of the wood. Now it will be secondary woodland, but give it 400 years, it will be, you know, it'll be an authentic ancient woodland. But if you do a plantation, it will never be authentic. Even 400 years from now, they will not be calling it an ancient woodland. It will obviously be inauthentic. It probably won't even be there because exotic trees don't bounce back like native trees. So, now I'm not entirely a nativist. I'm on the side of Himalayan balsam in our river valleys. I think the red squirrel, because it can't compete anymore, it's time to cash in its chips. I've only slight sympathy, but we can't spend hundreds of thousands, millions of pounds on protecting things that have lost the fight. But we haven't lost the fight for the English landscape. It's still here, as I'm showing you now. So that's what I would advocate is let the forest the woodland that we have already, let it expand, so that when those new trees, those saplings from the old woodland spread out, it will take things like bluebells and bear garlic and all the wonderful understory plants, and it will take them with them.